some of you will know me from my time at Rail Delivery Group, which is in the ticket accreditation side of the Rail Delivery Group. But in April, I decided to take retirement because I was rapidly approaching that age. And at the same time, obviously, it was lockdown. And I've always had a great interest in transport and ticketing throughout my life. And I decided that some of the knowledge and experience that I had gained over the years really could be put to some good use, hopefully, and help. And that is the reason why I've started up JourneyRight Limited. And yes, transport and ticketing has always been significant to me. My father was both, it's interesting, we've had buses talked about and rail. My father worked on for bus companies and also on the railways and had family involved in that. And myself, I can remember, and as a child, having a comic that had a character called Wee Willie Winky. And this person had a green ticket. This green ticket was fantastic because it could take him anywhere in the world. And listening to the various, the developments we've had in ticketing recently, and I think both Shaikh Bachman and with ACT and Dinesh, the last speaker, all of us are looking towards making ticketing and transport much easier for everybody. And one of the points with it is that every customer is different. Now, I have to say, I've had a wide experience with customers because before I started on the railways, I had 10 years working at the Department of Health and Social Security, dealing with people with all sorts of various situations. And then in ticket offices and telephone inquiry bureaus as well, dealing with all sorts of people. I always remember one morning taking the Forces rail card off Lord Lewin, who at the time was head of the Royal Navy. And that didn't go down very well, but he was quite polite. So I've quite a lot of experience as far as customers are concerned, and also with systems. The first ticketing system I ever saw was the multi-printer in Ipswich booking office when I was 5 years old. And over the years, we're now up to the e-tickets and CEMD that we've been talking about, ABT, etc. And the aim with technology is to make systems easier for the customer at the end of the day. Some people find there's a lot of satisfaction in the creation and development of the technology, what has been built. My enjoyment actually is applying that technology and trying to improve, not just for improvement's sake, but for the benefit of the customer. As I said, I was in Rail Delivery Group from 2006 to 2020, responsible for the ticket issuing system accreditation. And when I started there, the authority to travel, well, what was that? And matching a settlement record. For me, ticketing had been issuing something on Aptus perhaps, or through a ticket vending machine, and writing some data, and off it went. It was only when I really got to RDG that I realised that it's important that authority to travel matches the settlement record which is being used to settle to the carrier. And that applies whether there are multi carriers or just one. When somebody purchases the product, is the carrier actually going to receive the due amount for the journey that he deemed correct for the journey undertaken? Multiple systems, yeah, multiple products, multiple carriers. It has become, over my time, I think when I started, there was about 2 main TVMs, 3 desktop systems, and obviously the various TOCs as far as the rail side is concerned. But even with the presentations we've just seen, there are lots of carriers out there, lots of forms of transport, and lots of different solutions as far as the systems are concerned. And people, though, want to travel across those various systems. And that is where you start to need someone or some authority to be able to tie this all together. One of the questions that cropped up to me in my time at RDGS looking after accreditation is, well, that's all very well, you know, we need to be accredited to be able to sell tickets within the rail industry. But where do we actually start? What's the process? There was a certain amount of mystery that existed as far as this process was concerned. One of the success stories, and I'll put this slide in for the main, the main sponsor really of this has been Flowbird. And I was present when, at the time it was Parkion, when the TVM was put in at Fenchurch Street, which was the first one of their TVMs to come online. And working with a company from that starting point of how do we get accreditation up to actually delivery of a product is a complex and time-consuming, and obviously time is money, piece of work. But that was a great success, and I've included that picture, old as it may be, in this presentation. But the big question really is accreditation or checking in some form still required? You know, who assures you that the technology actually works that you're bringing into place? You can purchase any of these systems, etc., and it's delivered, and the customer is traveling, and the back office. But and the company will have done their development and checks. Where's the independent check as far as the actual technology is concerned? And then, is that technology being applied to achieve the desired result? What drives the desired result? Because if a carrier is normally much more interested in how they can run the actual service and what they need to provide for that, and the ticketing and payment for those services often is put into the hands of a solution, and it's the other companies, the company that devised the solution, it's their idea, and you need to then be able to work with the carrier, the organisation, to make it fit. And is that fit good? There's also the what if this happens. I think it was mentioned in the ACT one by Paula about what happens when a customer does something slightly different, if the phone runs out of power, if you've forgotten something, if you don't tap in or you don't tap out, etc. What really actually happens in those instances? And also, who is responsible at any one particular time, particularly if you're traveling across networks at any moment in time and amongst various carriers? Who at that moment in time is responsible? And is it the person who sold the product? Is it the person who's inspecting it? Is it the actual person, the carrier who's on board? Obviously, there is a balance between the risk you have of getting the correct settlement for the journey that the customer has paid for, and increasing the revenue. And I think there are different views. I think this was touched upon when with the Schreiber-Bachmann one and some of the questions there, that we need to, there is a balance, and that balance is depends on where it is and the carriers and the people involved, but what the risk is versus the revenue. There are pitfalls when it comes to accreditation, as you can imagine. And often it's about the expectations. Does everyone have that same expectation of the process? Oh, you know, well, it's accredited. Well, it may be accredited, but is that process of accreditation and checking, does it cover what you expect it to cover? That is often, I've had experience at times when, well, I thought it was accredited. No, that's not actually the case. That's something you as a purchaser of the system should have checked and made sure it worked in that way, because it doesn't have a direct effect upon either the settlement or the actual ticket that the customer is holds. And also, what does a process such as this try to is trying to achieve? And in the new world with the of smart ticketing, I think that's something that needs some work to be looked at. You know, at what level does these type of checking need to take place? Are timescales realistic? And have you got all the pieces together to make sure that your system, etc., works? One thing is, you can never leave. Once you're involved in this, it's always going to happen. You've got to continue that process. I think it's important about the future here, as we move away from paper and human interaction to smart media, we need to ensure that the systems work in synchronicity and that they deliver to carrier and customer. And it's important that we get that seamless travel experience. And also, lockdown has shown that we still need to travel. You know, human beings can't exist without moving around. So, some of the thoughts that I've had on how accreditation and checking can be improved. It's an irregular event. It's difficult to plan and resource, and is disruptive to the normal workflow. Aim should be to make the process as simple and efficient as possible. Planning needs to take place, ensuring, you know, the steps to achieving accreditation are clear and understood, and what's required at what stage. Breaking down the stages into another level of detail and prioritising what events should take place in what order. And acting as a go-between between the accreditor and the accredited. And obviously, always the most important thing is communication. So this is what have set out to do in putting together JourneyRight. Aiming to make this process as simple as possible to customers who are seeking it, and to help in that process. It's often a case of not what you know, it's who you know, to be able to help in that area. And I think this is hugely important. It's keeping up to date. Change is inevitable, but it does consume time and effort at an alarming rate. And if you can be able to turn to somebody to help in that change and keeping up to date, that must be a great help. And also providing tools and framework for a disruptive process that takes place infrequently. If someone is providing that and that you can turn to, that must be a benefit. So last of all, JourneyRight, providing a go-to service to provide advice and assistance. And if you want or would like to understand a bit more about us, we have an online room that's always available for a chat. There we go, that's it. Any questions?
Well,